Welcome back to Wishwell Farms, everybody. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you some of our harvest totals that came off of our vegetable farm during the 2025 growing season. But first, I want to take you through all of our greenhouses and show you some of the progress we have made getting everything cleaned out and winterized and ready for another growing season, as well as some of the other things that we still need to get done before the cold winter weather arrives. So the greenhouse we're currently standing in right now is the one we call our little house because it's only 21 feet wide, but it is the standard 96-foot length. And as you can see, we only have 4 rows of beto buckets in here. We grow our tomatoes in here hydroponically. So while I was traveling through the Ozarks with my wife on a little RV vacation, my son Gavin spent about 4 hours in here getting everything cleaned out. We had already had the plants drug out, but he got all of the rock wool cubes removed from the beto buckets, thrown in the dumpster. And as you can see, all the buckets have perlite in them currently. They just need topped off with fresh perlite. So as I've mentioned in prior videos, we use our perlite for 2 growing seasons. These buckets were all filled with fresh perlite last winter or early spring and only have 1 growing season on the perlite. So that's why we're just going to top them off and use it for a second season. So he brought the leaf blower out here, got all the rows nice and clean. I mean, it looks fantastic in here and it's just about ready for another season. So the only thing I have left to do in here is to pressurize the system and make sure all these drip lines are flushed out and clean and sanitized. And then we'll come in here and top off all these buckets probably in the spring. And this one will be ready to go. So I just thought of one more thing in this greenhouse. This is going to be year number 3 that I've been wanting to change this poly. It's on year 10, I think. And I don't even have the inflator going anymore. There's so many holes and rips in this plastic that it won't even hold air between the 2 layers. So that is something that definitely has to be done yet this fall or first thing next spring, is replacing the poly. And I already have the plastic on hand, so we just need 3 or 4 or 5 hours of calm, no wind, and we can get it changed out. All right, let's go check out another greenhouse. So as I just mentioned, my wife and I were in the Ozarks in Missouri and Arkansas for the past 11 days. We just got back yesterday. And while I was out there, we visited Farmer Dre from Gardener's Orchard and Bakery. That was the prior video that came out before this one. So if you haven't seen that and you're interested in checking out my farm visit with Farmer Dre, check the link down below in the description. Also, a week prior to that, I was out in Pennsylvania on a backpacking trip and I visited Broyans farm and Veggie boys. I've been talking about this all summer long, wanting to go out there and visit those guys. So if you haven't seen those videos, they will also be down below. All right, this is greenhouse number 1. We call it our tall house because it's 18 feet tall. This was the first one we cleaned out, and it will be the first one that is planted this spring. And as you can see, the Dutch beto buckets are empty because we had 2 growing seasons on the perlite in here. So we will be filling all these buckets with fresh perlite. And as you can see, I have all the dripper lines up off the ground, just made cleaning in here so much easier. So I've already done 1 initial flush in all the greenhouses to flush out all the sediment and fertilizer residues and all that junk to try to get these lines nice and clean. I want to do that 1 more time tomorrow, and then I will cap off the ends, pressurize them, and I will force hot water through these lines with oxidate or some other kind of cleaning solution to make sure any fertilizer deposits that are in these little drip lines is broken up and dissolved, and hopefully none of these little woodpecker drippers are plugged up and they'll be ready to go for next year. And then the only other thing I really have left to do in here is to flush out my boiler. I will force air into the main line down here, and I'll attach a hose to one of these little outlets here and just force the water outside the greenhouse until it's all empty and ready for winter. And that only takes like 10 minutes, no big deal. I still have water in my water heater, so I'll have to get it all drained out as well. The reason the water heater still has water in it is because the lines are kind of all connected and I can't turn on my irrigation pump to force water through all these irrigation lines unless the water heater is connected. So as soon as I get all the lines flushed 1 final time, then I will drain the water heater. And finally, in this greenhouse, we're hoping to change the poly out on this side. I think it's on year number 6 or 7. This side over here is only 2 years old. So this greenhouse has a ridge vent. You can see that little ridge vent up there. It kind of looks just like one of these side walls. And it's 2 parts. So we have a west side and an east side. And I usually don't change them out at the same time. So we got pretty fresh poly over here. It's gonna be good to go for another 4 or 5 years, but we need to get this one changed out. And this one's probably more important to do than the other greenhouse I just showed you. There's the roll of poly. It is a tube. That means it has 2 layers all rolled up into one roll, ready to go. And obviously I have a little bit of cleaning and organization to do back there in the storage room. All right, let's go into greenhouse number 2, our long house. And we call it our long house because it is 148 feet long. This one's 96, just like the little house, and they start side by side. So you can see how much longer this one is than the tall house. This one is all cleaned out and ready to go as well, other than giving the lines a final flush, just like the other greenhouses. I just love walking through a clean greenhouse. Just look at this, it's beautiful. I've never had it this clean since day one. We actually used a broom to sweep up all the debris this year. Usually there's all kinds of bits and pieces of crumbled up leaves all over the ground, because for the past 20 years I've used rakes to rake all this up. But when you're walking on dead plant material, you know, you're crunching up those dead leaves and almost into like powder, or at least little chunks. And the rake would always miss a lot of it. So this year we swept it up with brooms, and it almost looks like concrete in here. It's a real fine grit stone, almost kind of powdery, and it has a really hard base, almost like concrete. So sweeping it up really worked well this year. Out the back door here, I'll show you what 1,000 plants looks like. Well, there's Kipper. Hey Kipper, kitty kitty. Hey Kipper, what you doing? You finding some mice? I sure hope so. This is 1,000 tomato plants right here. Once they're all dried up, you can see it doesn't look like much. And there's 615 right there. I've been asked if I remove the plastic clips. I do not. These are a throwaway plastic clip, once and done. I wish I could run all this through like a shredder or chipper and throw it in the dumpster, but for me, it's easier to just pile them all up right over there and light it on fire. And it'll all be gone in a matter of minutes. And there's really not that much plastic in it. I mean, it's like a case of clips, so it's not a lot. And then this pile of plants right here is 500 that came from the little greenhouse. And this is what it looks like after you dump Beto buckets. So that is just the root balls that were inside the buckets. It's like 90% perlite, but it's being held together into a shape of a cube because of all the roots. But I'll just run my tractor over this with a scraper blade, and it just pulverizes it all, and you'll never even see it next year. And I'll spread it all around out here in the field. All right, down here to the Grape tomato greenhouse. This is a 30 by 96. And this is manufactured by a company out of Canada called DeClout, or DeClout. I'm not sure which way you say it. This is a Polytex sales house. It used to be a sales greenhouse with shelves in it, but we converted it to a greenhouse for growing tomatoes. The tall house we were just in is also a Polytex house, and they don't even make that model anymore. That thing could probably withstand a hurricane. It is beefy. And this one is a Jaderloon, the longhouse, made by Jaderloon, and we're gonna go into that one last. That's our seed house, our transplant house. I don't know the manufacturer of that one. It is very, very old, probably over 30 to 35 years old. That was my original greenhouse on the farm, and I actually purchased it from another grower about 2 miles down the road back in 2001. So I've had it for 24 years, and it looked rather old when I purchased it from him, so it's gotta be old. All right, into our grape tomato greenhouse. And we are almost finished cleaning it out. You can see we have steel T-post throughout each row because we use the floor to weave system in here. The tomato plants that we grow in here are all determinates, so they have a determined height. They only grow about 6 feet tall. And that's why we string them up with the floor to weave system rather than pulling down strings from a trellis up above like any other greenhouses. If you happen to be new to my channel and wondering what the heck am I talking about, We grow a lot of greenhouse tomatoes, specifically hydroponically. And I have a whole series of greenhouse tomato growing videos on my channel from earlier in the spring and from last year if you want to check those out. But anyway, in here, this is where we grow our grape tomatoes, but I'm getting out of grape tomatoes. I've slowly grown less and less every year. This year it was down to 3 rows, and I think next year I thought about not even growing grape tomatoes anymore. It's just a very, very labor intensive job, kind of like raising strawberries, and nobody really likes picking them. So if I have to hire extra people or people specifically just to harvest grape tomatoes for 6 weeks, it's almost not worth it. I know some of our customers would be upset that count on having our grape tomatoes to purchase at our farmers markets during May and June and July, but I'm thinking about growing all determinate beefsteak style tomatoes in here. This year we had Red Deuce in here on row 1 and 2. They did pretty good. There's a few things I want to do different with them this year to try to get larger tomatoes and maybe more marketable tomatoes. A lot of them were kind of on the small side, and we did have some insect pressure in here. So I just need to manage them a little bit better this year. But I'm thinking about doing 4 rows of beefsteak style tomatoes in here this year. And maybe I'll still grow 2 rows of grape tomatoes. I'll give it 1 more year and we'll see how they go. So just like any other greenhouses, I still need to flush these lines 1 more time, pressurize them, and force some cleansing solution through them so they don't get all plugged up on me. And as you can see, we still are in the middle of cleaning this greenhouse up. So Emma will be out here tomorrow, as well as my son Gavin. We'll get the rest of these piles picked up into the wheelbarrow to get them out of here. Run the leaf blower through here 1 final time to get it nice and clean, and it will be ready for next year's crop. If you're wondering why there are holes every 1.5 feet along this ground cover, it's because we used to grow in the soil. So when we first built this greenhouse, we pushed the topsoil aside, made a nice pad that was level, brought the topsoil back in, rototilled it all up, laid the ground cover, and I burnt these holes in the ground cover for our tomato plants. But I didn't have much success growing in the soil in here, so we went to coconut coir grow bags, and they lay right across the top of those holes. But I'm thinking about replacing this ground cover because last year a lot of the roots grew out of the cocoa coir bags and into the soil. There's only soil like on this half. In the back half we had a low spot, and I brought about 10 tons of gravel in here. So it's mainly a gravel floor in about half of the greenhouse, maybe 2/3 of the greenhouse. And the roots were still growing down into that gravel, and the plants didn't want to die when I was trying to terminate them at the end of the year. They wanted to keep sending roots down into that gravel and into the soil here in the front half to stay alive. So I need to, and we're always fighting weeds coming up out of these holes. So I just need to take this ground cover out and replace it. I don't know if it's going to happen this year or not. We'll see. But yeah, in here we use coconut coir grow bags. I don't really like growing in a coconut coir. Let me show you why. There's part of the reason why. All this waste that has to be thrown in the dumpster and taken to the landfill. I mean, I could rip off each individual cube, which is labor intensive, and throw that in the dumpster, and then cut open all these bags and dump it out in the field. That's one option. But this is only 1/3 of the greenhouse. We had 5 skids worth, I think, and they've already been landfilled. So when I say I don't really like to grow in coconut coir, it's not because the plants don't do as well or it's not as easy on me. It's because of all that waste. So, you know, with Beto buckets, the buckets last forever. Well, for a long time, probably 30 years until you start getting brittle buckets. And, you know, you can use your perlite over and over and over if you have a way to sanitize it and clean it. But we don't. We just use it for 2 years and replace it, and it's really not that expensive. And our final greenhouse, our starter house. And it's still kind of a disaster. We have some flats here that we didn't need. They were kind of extra. So I got to throw out these old cantaloupe plants that we didn't need, sweep everything up in here, and get it ready for planting season, which is gonna come quickly because I gotta have this ready to go for our tomato transplants, which are started in my basement, and then they get brought out here in late January. So yeah, late January is gonna come quick. Boy, this turned out to be a nice fall day. A little bit of blue sky, it's crisp and cool and pretty calm. So in the next video, we're gonna be pulling up plastic and drip tape. You can see all of our plastic out there. between the pond and the woods. That was where all of our vegetables were, as well as right over here on the other side of these trees. And this is where our watermelon were. And then way over there on the other side of that tree line, by those silos where our old dairy farm is more plastic that we have to pull drip tape up out of. And when I say plastic, I mean biodegradable films. I just call it plastic mulch. Almost all of our films that we use are biodegradable, except on tomatoes and peppers. So we do have 6 + 4, 10 rows. So I got 10 rows of conventional plastic mulch that I will have to pull up and dispose of. All right, let's talk about some of the yields that came off of our farm in 2025. So I just added all these up right now before I turned the camera on. And I gotta say, I'm a little disappointed. Actually, quite disappointed in how many of our crops did this year. At the time, it seemed like we got pretty good yields on some of the crops. And there were some that just were a total flop this year. And you'll know why here in a second when I explain these numbers. So comparing this to previous seasons, I would say we're down on just about every crop across the board. And some of that is due to the drought that we had the final 8 weeks of the season. Some of it is due to some weed pressure, raccoon damage. We didn't really have much bird damage in the sweet corn, mainly raccoons. Disease pressure, insect damage. So you add all those things up and it does take a toll on your yields, that's for sure. Let's kick things off with greenhouse tomatoes, since that is the very first crop that we start harvesting on our farm in mid-May. So I think grape tomatoes, yeah, May 10th, we started harvesting grape tomatoes. That was the very first crop that we harvested. We ended up with 3,146 pints. In the past, we were probably closer to double that. I remember one year when that entire greenhouse was grape tomatoes, we were closer to 10,000 pints. So a third of where we used to be, but that's all right. That's the way I planned it out. And I would guess that we probably left 1,000 pints in there, because in late July, they all started splitting on us. The bugs got out of control and we were having much lower demand for our grape tomatoes at the farmers markets, and we just had to walk away from them. So there was a lot of yield left on the plants this year. They did really good. For the 4 rows that we had, I would say they yielded where they were supposed to. So I was happy with that. Next up, our red round or beefsteak style tomatoes. So I'm very disappointed in this number. I thought it was going to be much higher, like 30 to 50% higher. So we ended up harvesting 23,370 pounds. And that is not good. I think that's like 12 pounds per plant, something like that. But we have a very short growing season. Greenhouse tomatoes can potentially yield 40 to 50 pounds if they're grown for a 9 to 10 month season. But ours are grown from basically harvesting after Memorial Day. So June, July, and part of August, and maybe a little bit of May. So not even 4 months, about 3.5 months. And that is just for us to get that edge on the early market at our farmers markets until we move into our field tomatoes. So yeah, 23,000 pounds is definitely less than I would have liked to have seen, but it still seemed like really good yields at the time. And I think the 3 months that we were really harvesting heavy out of there, they were giving us the amount of yields that we should be getting off those plants. It's just that our season is shortened compared to a lot of greenhouse growers. All right, next up, sweet corn. This is the crop that I got my start in over 30 years ago. So I love growing and harvesting sweet corn, but this year was a bad one. We had good parts of the season. There were certain plantings that yielded like crazy, almost 1,000 dozen to the acre. But overall, we had pretty pathetic harvest. I've had some years in the past where we harvested 15 to 20,000 dozen. So these yields are absolutely terrible because we grew almost 20 acres of sweet corn. So you would expect to get close to 20,000 dozen off of that amount of acreage. But that just tells you how much the raccoons and the drought and the weeds affected our crop. But it is what it is. I should have started this out by saying we had a very profitable year. This has been one of our most profitable years in my farming history over the past 25 years. And looking at these yields, you wouldn't think there is any way that could be. All right, green beans. This was probably our worst crop that I've ever grown since I started harvesting with our 1-row green bean picker back in 2011. I'm almost embarrassed to tell you this number, because in a good year, this number could be harvested off of 1 acre. And we actually had an acre last year where we probably got half of what we got this year in total. 275 bushel. Absolutely horrific. So I'm thinking back to our crop, and I'm remembering that our early season harvest was next to nothing. I mean, it was just a total loss because of the cold, wet rains we had this spring. So we lost probably 95% of our green beans early on. And then the ones that came on later in the season, a couple crops had weed pressure and grass. Didn't really have any bug issues this year, but too much rain early on and then no rain at the end caused us to have terrible yields. I would probably like to see that closer to 1,000 bushel. I probably would have been happy with 1,000 bushel. So, yep, that's where it was on green beans. Next up, cantaloupe and watermelons. Now, cantaloupe, I think we had a pretty good season. I only plant like 2 acres. I don't plant a whole lot of cantaloupe, and I space those out into 3 plantings. We harvested 4,400 cantaloupe. So it always felt like we had plenty of cantaloupe on hand, except maybe for 1 or 2 weeks there where we were kind of in between crops. But overall, I'm pretty happy with our cantaloupe harvest. Watermelons, I think they yielded pretty good. We just had terrible insect control on them. The cucumber beetles just devastated my watermelon. They probably ruined half of my crop. And of that half, I would say half of that was left in the field. There was probably another 1,000 out there we could have harvested that maybe didn't size up or was just completely eaten up by cucumber beetles. So definitely going to be working on that next year to keep our crop cleaner and free of beetles. We harvested just under 1,000 watermelons this year, and we only had like a half acre. So I guess I'm happy with that. We always had plenty of watermelons. I don't really have a need for more than that. So 900 watermelons is what it was. All right, field tomatoes. So I've definitely backed off on field tomatoes over the years because I don't like to have too many late in August when everybody else has tomatoes. I can't sell a lot of tomatoes in August and September just because of the huge amount of supply at the farmers markets. And since we sell all of our produce through farmers markets direct to consumer, I don't have any wholesale outlets. And there was years in the past where I might have too many tomatoes and I'd have to ship them off the food banks or let them rot on the vine. And you know, many of you remember seeing all the wasted tomatoes in the field this year. We still had too many tomatoes, but we did get some good harvest off of them. And it's probably only 1/10 of an acre that we grow. I had 4 rows and we really only harvested about 3 of those rows. The one that was Romas, we hardly picked any Romas this year. I just don't have a market for Romas. It just blows my mind how many Romas that Veggie boys and Broyans go through. I was talking to them about that, and they just have a lot of demand for canning tomatoes being in the Roma tomato type, or the paste tomato. People that want canning tomatoes from me, they want the red brown beefsteak style. So I don't have any market for Roma tomatoes except for a few customers that want to make sauce. And other than that, they just all went to waste out there this year. We picked 8,000 pounds of field tomatoes. So whether that's good or bad, I don't really know, but it was enough for me. When it comes to all the other crops like zucchini, cucumbers, pickles, yellow squash, eggplant, hot peppers, onions. I didn't grow onions this year. What else was out there? Broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower. I didn't really keep track of all those yields. I could figure it out by looking at my sales sheets on how much I loaded into my box trucks every Saturday for farmers markets, but I don't keep detailed records of those like I do for the other crops that I just talked about in detail. So there you have it. Those are some of our numbers this year on our crop yields. Let me know if you have any questions down below. Alrighty folks, there you have it. A little bit of a farm update as well as some of our yields that came off of our vegetable farm in 2025. I still have a few farm visits lined up here in the next few weeks, but I'm always looking for more. So if you guys like those or have any other suggestions of farms that I should visit, maybe in Ohio, that would be great so I don't have to travel real far. Drop them down in the comments below. As well as any farm topic ideas you guys would like to see me discuss about our farm, let me know in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate all your guys' support this year. It means a lot to me. Don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed it, and I will see you all again next time down on the farm.